Is it better to build in metal or in brick in a water storm with metal corrosion? Right, so I'm queuing up for this power level 116 evacuate the shelter mission in Twine Peaks because it's got metal corrosion and an ice storm. So the ice storm means you've got water husks. So we'll talk a little bit briefly about the loadout. I've got BASE Kyle in the lead with 84% additional build health, slowly roll so that attackers will freeze when they hit me, MegaBASE to increase connectivity by 1, power modulation to heal my structures, electrify floors to damage husks that walk over, Cupid's arrow to split the arrows, survivors to keep me alive, banner for a respawn point in case survivalist doesn't work, and stationary hover target in case I start getting overwhelmed by husks. So when we load into the mission, we need to get straight over to the shelter as quickly as possible. Husks will be attacking the shelter even before we get there, and there are a number that need to be killed before the initial wave dies off, but that number doesn't deplete until you get to the shelter and it tells you what the total is. At that point the number will go down. Now in this, because it's a one player mission, it's only 10 husks, so it's pretty simple and the shield will cover that, but you do need to get to the shelter for that count to start. Okay, to just clear out a bit of space around, it's a really good location for the shelter. It's right in the corner of the map. The husks are only going to be able to attack it really from one direction. So just going to throw up a really simple shelter, a really simple cover around the shelter after I clear down some of these. Despite the fact that there's metal corrosion, I'm still going to build out of metal because it's a water storm. Now, one thing you need to understand about husks is the elemental husks will do different amounts of damage to different types of material. A nature husk will do double damage to metal structures. A water husk will do double damage to a brick or stone structure, and a fire husk will do double damage to a wood structure. Now, I wouldn't recommend building things out of wood anyway, regardless of whether it's a firestorm or not, so that's a bit of a moot point, but when it comes to a water storm you shouldn't really be building out of brick. Any structures that are going to get attacked by husks should be built out of the appropriate material. For any other structures you can use wood, brick, metal, whatever your preference is, as long as it's not one that's going to get attacked by the husks. Now I've put my base in the corner because of the way that the husks are going to attack. We won't be able to reach that back corner anyway, so it doesn't matter, that's not covered by base. And now I'm just going to go around and reinforce everything up to level 3. Here's some husks already starting to attack, so we'll just get rid of those. So I'm just going to put a brick wall there so that we can have a look at the relative strength of the walls once they're fully upgraded. When it comes to the additional damage that elemental husks do to materials, it doesn't matter what type of husk it is. If it's an elemental husk, it will do the appropriate amount of damage. So if you have a water smasher, it will do double damage to brick. So if a smasher's charge is normally, let's say, 2,000 damage, again, if it's a water husk, a water smasher against a brick wall, it will do 4,000 damage instead of 2,000 damage. So let's have a look at the relative strength. So a tier 3 metal wall is 18,000, a tier 3 brick wall is 13,000. 18,000 versus 13,000 doesn't seem like a massive change until you consider the fact that the double damage from a water husk actually means that your brick wall is about 6,700, so it's going to get destroyed very, very quickly by a water husk, especially if you get a smasher charging up against it. When it comes to metal corrosion, it's only the smaller husks that will cause metal corrosion. So your assassin husks, your basic husks, and your riot huskies and your normal huskies, they will all cause metal corrosion. But your larger husks, things like smashers, they will not cause metal corrosion. So a smasher that charges causing 2000 damage against a metal wall, it doesn't matter if it's a metal corrosion storm, it will still only do the same amount of damage and will not apply the metal corrosion effect. Metal corrosion can really be thought of a bit like affliction on a weapon. It will do a small percentage of damage dealt to it over time, so a couple of ticks of a small amount of damage, and when we get later on in the video we're about to see quite how little that damage is really, and why you shouldn't worry too much about metal corrosion and building in metal. I would build in metal in a metal corrosion storm regardless of whether it was water or not. The only time I would build in brick over metal is if it's in a nature storm, because a nature husk will do double damage to a metal structure. Okay, so here I'm going to use wall darts. The reason for this is a wall dart will trigger within 3 tiles and will go out 6 tiles doing the same amount of damage all the way through. Here, because the cannonballs have something to bounce off, I'm going to use the broadside. The balls will bounce off the wall and roll back again and do multiple iterations of damage across a short distance. If you leave them firing out into the open, their damage drop off is quite severe. They will do max damage up to about 2 or 3 tiles, and then the damage will drop off very, very fast. Here I've used healing wall spikes on the walls. The reason for that is the metal corrosion. It will more than mitigate the damage done there. And I'm going to put some wall spikes down the bottom, so the husks will likely just attack the middle. They will go for the middle. They want the shortest distance to the center of the shelter, so they will go for the middle. I'm just going to scatter a few around to slow the husks down, and then I'm going to intersperse it with some anti-air traps. Now I'm using tier 4 traps for the most part because it's a 116 mission. When it comes to the anti-air traps, I'm going to use max level anti-air traps because there's no difference in the materials used whether it's tier 1 or tier 5, so I might as well use the tier 5s here. And then just above I'm going to put some tire traps to push the husks away, noting that I put my back in the direction I want the husks to be pushed. And there's the perks on those: triple durability, double reload. They're not really there to do much damage, they're there purely to push the husks away. And now I'm going to just chuck up some ceiling electric fields. Haven't really got time to be messing about crafting some lower level ones, so I'm just going to use these tier 5 traps, and that's not going to be too wasteful. There's not too many of them. And now we have the defense. Let's speed through this because it's not very exciting watching a bunch of traps kill a bunch of husks.
Protect the shelter until the survivors can be safely extracted.
As you can see, I'm not even killing husks myself most of the time. I'm letting the traps do the job. Just going to slow it down here so we can have a look at the metal corrosion. See, the downward purple arrows indicate the metal corrosion happening, and if you look at the damage being done to the wall, it's dropping by about 300 per tick, which is a minuscule amount when you consider 300 out of 18,000 for my fully upgraded walls. Even if it's 3 or 4 ticks, that's not a huge amount of damage. The wall spikes are easily going to be able to cover that off relatively quickly. You just have to make sure that the husks don't bunch up against the same wall and keep hitting it, because each husk that hits it will incur an extra bit of damage. So there you go, 300 damage per tick from metal corrosion against an 18,000 damage wall. Seems to be a no-brainer to me. Metal every time in a water storm with metal corrosion. Thanks for watching.